Unit 2, Fiction Tales.
Chapter 6. Macbeth, William Shakespeare. Read the lesson. William Shakespeare is one of the greatest dramatists of English literature. His plays are divided into comedies, tragedies, and histories. Macbeth is one of Shakespeare's great tragedies. The play is set in Old Scotland. Shakespeare describes how Macbeth murders the Scottish king so that he could become the ruler. Characters: Duncan, King of Scotland; Macbeth, general in King's army; Lady Macbeth, wife of Macbeth; Banquo, general in the King's army; Macduff, a nobleman and Thane of Fife; the three witches. They foretell the future. Fleur's son to Banquo, Malcolm and sons to Duncan Dunalbain. Cold mists swirled across the flat grey Scottish plain. Two men raced their horses across the heath, their minds filled with their own thoughts. They were Macbeth, Thane of Calamis, and Banquo returning from a war they had won, and their face shone with triumph. Suddenly, a howling wind sprang up. Out of nowhere, so it seemed, three withered old women appeared before them. The three were dancing around a witch's cauldron. The first witch saluted Macbeth and shrieked, "All hail Macbeth, Thane of Glamis!" True enough, though Macbeth, he was the Thane of Glamis. The second figure said, "Hail to three, Macbeth, Thane of Cawdor." The third witch screeched, "All hail Macbeth, who shall be king hereafter." Macbeth stared in amazement. But King Duncan was alive, and so were his two sons, the princes. The three skinny grey creatures now danced weirdly around Banquo, chanting in high crackling noises. "Hail, lesser than Macbeth, yet greater. You shall give birth to kings, but never be one." Then, as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished into the eerie mists. "Have we gone mad?" whispered Banquo. Both the men were confused and not sure that what they had seen and heard was real. As they stood there, two horsemen came riding up to them. Duncan, the King of Scotland, had sent them to receive the brave victorious generals. The messengers had news for Macbeth. "The king has granted you the title of Thane of Cawdor," they said. Macbeth's heart stood still. This was what the witches had told him. Banquo saw the strange look on his face and said, "Be careful, Macbeth. Evil powers often mislead men and harm them." But the thought haunted Macbeth. The second prophecy had come true. What would happen to the third? The messengers also told Macbeth, "The king will stay with you tonight in the castle." Macbeth's spirit soared. The king in his house. What an honor! He sent a message to his wife, telling her of this privilege. He also wrote to her about the witches. When Macbeth reached his castle, he saw his wife on fire with dreams of power. It was all she could talk about. And as they talked about the witches' prophecy, Macbeth's own heart began to pound with excitement. He was now the Thane of Cawdor. Would be King of Scotland. "Yes, you will," said his wife fiercely, "and we can't lose this opportunity. Let's murder King Duncan when he comes here as our guest." Macbeth was full of horror at the thought, but the thought of becoming the king seized him completely. And so, that night, when King Duncan was asleep, a trembling figure crept into the room, quickly, so that he would not have time to think. Macbeth stabbed Duncan with the two daggers his wife had placed there. The terrible deed was done. In the morning, all hell broke loose. The king had been murdered. There was horror everywhere. No one was safe. Malcolm and Dunalbain, Duncan's sons and rightful heirs to the throne, fled from Scotland, fearing for their lives. In time, the nobles agreed that Macbeth should be their next king. He was a mighty general and a person whom the king had loved. The third prophecy, made by the witches, had now come to pass. Soon, Scotland became a gloomy kingdom. There was fear everywhere. Macbeth himself was still troubled by the witches' prophecy about Banquo, and had cunningly arranged for Banquo to be murdered. When Macbeth held a feast to which he invited all the nobles, Banquo's ghost appeared, smeared with blood, to take his seat at the table. Macbeth's horror knew no bounds. Worried and terrified, he sought the three witches again. He met them at midnight in a lonely cave. They were cooking something, and the smoke from the bubbling cauldron began to take shapes. "Beware of Macduff, the Thane of Fife," said the first figure. "Only if Birnam Wood moves to your will, you be in danger," said another. Macbeth was at peace. Birnam Wood was a forest. Who had ever heard of forest moving like a man? A new reign of terror began. Macduff's wife and children were murdered. So was anyone who seemed to be a danger to Macbeth. Meanwhile, in the castle, Lady Macbeth began having nightmares about the murder of King Duncan. She dreamt that she had blood marks on her hands all the time. She became depressed and unhappy, and finally she took her. Meanwhile, in the castle, Lady Macbeth began having nightmares about the murder of King Duncan. She dreamt that she had blood marks on her hands all the time. She became depressed and unhappy, and finally she took her own life. Macduff ordered his soldiers to cut down branches from Birnam Wood and carry them so that Macbeth would not know the exact number of soldiers in the army of the enemy. When Macbeth's soldiers saw the army, they were astonished. "Birnam Wood is moving," they shouted. Macbeth rushed out. It was true. The forest was moving. A gruesome battle took place, and Macbeth finally came face to face with Macduff. Macbeth realized that his end was near. His last thoughts were that he should never have trusted the three witches. Malcolm, the lawful heir to the throne, was coronated. In later years, the sons of Fleance, Banquo's grandsons, became rulers of Scotland. The witches had been correct in their prediction. New words: thane, noblemen; heaths, an empty stretch of land covered with shrub; saluted, greeted; cauldron, a large cooking vessel; screeched, screamed in a shrill voice; weirdly, strangely, eerie, strange; prophecy, prediction; privilege, honor, smeared; marked; here, successor; here, after, in the future.